Welcome to Students Incorporated, a podcast exploring the topics of business, education, technology, and design. I'm your host, Mr. Jason. Join me weekly as my team and I produce content that's informative, positive, fun, and uplifting. Episodes include student conversations, interviews with thought leaders, and inspirational stories with an international flavor. This podcast is created and produced with the help of students from the International Community School of Bangkok. Hello and welcome back. I'm Mr. Jason and I'm joined by several special guests today in our studio. We welcome Mr. Ben and Mrs. Marilee along with several student writers. We'll be discussing the importance of writing and then we'll hear from our student writers. Then for segment 2, we'll continue with part 9 of our story, The Secrets of El Dorado. Part 9 is titled Piecing It Together. But first, let's get our quote of the day and hear some headline news.
Hey everyone, our quote of the day comes from Louis L'Amour. He said, "Start writing no matter what. The water does not flow until the faucet is turned on." In this quote, Louis L'Amour highlights the importance of taking action and getting started on a task, even if you may not feel ready or inspired. Writing, like many creative endeavors, can be daunting and intimidating at times. However, this quote emphasizes that the key to making progress and tapping into your creativity is to simply begin. By using the analogy of turning on a faucet to start the flow of water, L'Amour suggests that once you begin writing, the ideas and words will start to flow naturally. It is often the act of starting and breaking through that initial resistance that allows the creative process to unfold. And that's our quote of the day. Now on to some headline news.
Here's some headline writing and literature news from around the world. Starting with our first news, in the state of Michigan, almost all public schools may have the chance to get their own library and librarian if a set of 3 bill that was proposed to the Senate Education Committee is passed. These bills were proposed in the midst of the state's low academic achievement scores, which seem to have a correlation with the degree of access to a library. The bill has received widespread support from local educators and parents, as well as from figures such as the former president of the American Association of School Librarians, who all state that the bill would be highly beneficial for the students' education. However, the costs are extremely high, making it a very hard decision for the Senate to decide as well. On to our second news. With a deadline of May 31st, the Bridport Prize competition is tailored towards poetry and has a grand prize of 5,000 euros for the winners. The top 3 winners will have all their poems published in the Bridport Prize anthology and are invited to the awards ceremony where they can receive feedback and advice from judges and professionals. Writers of any nationality are allowed to submit their work, but there is an age limit of 16 years and a fee of 12 euros for every poem that you submit. However, it is still a great opportunity for you to have your writing viewed and critiqued by experts. On to our last and final news. Female billionaire Mackenzie Scott, who has dedicated a large portion of her fortune to donating to nonprofit organizations and charities, donated a sum of $2 million to the Massachusetts Advocates for Children organization, which is more than the organization's budget for a year. The money that she donated will go to helping children in the classroom, including those with disabilities. Additionally, she had also donated $2.5 million to help jumpstart a grant program to help Colorado children access vaccines. And that ends our headline news for today.
We are back for our first segment and we'll be talking with 2 educators and several students about the important topic of writing. The students will also be sharing a recent writing piece they submitted to an international writing contest. So, for our first guest, we welcome Mr. Ben and Kate. Shania will kick off this segment with our first question.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Mr. Ben, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Ben Radin, and I teach ESL in the secondary with middle school and high school classes. And I've been here, this is my 26th year at ICS, so I've been here almost since the school has started.
Here's another follow-up question, and it's a big picture question. How does learning writing skills impact a student's academic and professional future?
I think writing is kind of a open window to who this student is. In other words, it's important as both a way for colleges to see who this student is. It's also a way for us when we do writing that people can look at our writing and they can tell a lot about us, about our personality, about things we enjoy, our interests. So it's really kind of like it opens up a window to the writer themselves. So it's important. And in our professional life, it's a statement of, it can be a statement of who we are.
All right, our next question is for Kate. Kate, thanks for being brave and coming on the show. What grade are you in, and what are some of the things you like to do with your free time?
I'm in 7th grade, and I enjoy baking to relieve my stress.
All right, I do have a follow-up question for you, Kate, as well. Kate, describe the process used for writing. How do you get started?
I like to get into a comfortable position, and then I let the words flow.
Okay, back to Mr. Ben. Our next question is, what role does writing play in developing critical thinking and communication skills in students?
Writing is a really good way for us to learn how to analyze things. Like if we write something and then we have the chance to go back and look at that and, no, I didn't mean that, or I need to explain this further, or how can I support the thing that I've said? So it's a really good way for us to learn how to analyze and to be critical of ourselves. And that's a really hard thing to learn because we don't like to be critical. We don't like for people to be critical about us. But if we can learn that skill, then we can really use that in a lot of different areas.
All right, here's another question for you. How can a teacher help students find their unique voice and style in writing?
A lot of times when students write, they like to keep the same style. They like to write the way they've always written. And for myself, I like to really try new things from time to time. I never knew that I liked squid until I first tried it. And now I really, really, really enjoy not dried squid, but cooked squid. I really, really like it. And I never would have thought I would have liked that. So by trying new things and by experimenting with different kinds of writing, then that we can challenge ourselves in that role as well.
Okay, Kate, I have another question for you. What part of writing do you find most fun?
I actually like choosing a title. I never start with the title. I always feel like I have to write at least half of the poem or story before I choose a title.
All right, I like that. I think that's probably a smart move, right? All right, here's another question for you, Kate, and it's a fun one. You'll have to use your writer's imagination for this one, all right? If you could write a letter to anyone in the world, past or present, who would it be and what would you say?
I would write a letter to Christine de Pizan. She is one of the first women poets in the medieval time period. I would tell her about her impact on many writers today, as well as her impact on rules to equalize men's power.
Wow, that's really cool and insightful. Thank you so much, Kate. Now, before we have Kate read her writing piece, here's our last question for Mr. Bent. What kind of encouragement or advice would you give to young writers out there?
I think one really good thing that we as humans can benefit is to give ourselves a voice by writing to ourselves. In other words, writing journals or notes or comments about things that we like or don't like or what we want to do or want to see changed. Even for myself, I look back now at things that I wrote in high school and college and even after college and different periods of my life, and I review things. I go back and read some journals that I wrote when I was living in Europe, and just different things that make me or allow me to reflect on myself and to see what I've been through, my different experiences and lessons I've learned. So I think by writing to ourselves, it really helps us to think about ourselves and think about our lives and what we're doing in this world.
Thank you, Mr. Ben. To end the first part of this segment, we've asked Kate to read one of her written pieces. Kate, what is the title of your piece, and can you briefly describe what it's about?
The title of my piece is called The Maze of Life. It's about the troubles of life and how God can help you through it. I wrote this piece around the time I was baptized.
Thank you, Kate. You may now read your writing piece when you are ready.
The maze of life, twisting and turning, lost in my thoughts. Every corner I turn leads to another. Fear lurches at one corner. Nervousness is hiding around the bend. Guilt seems to be above. The claws of loneliness are below. The maze has no start. The maze has no end. Every time I think I've made it, something is waiting. Something with claws, something that will torture me into doing a sinful action. I had no choice to go, no choice to fall into this endless maze. Trapped and locked away, nowhere to stay, nowhere to feel safe. I felt hidden, lost without moving. I was scared. I fell into the claws of fear, running into tears. I seemed to be swinging from mood to mood. That's when I finally heard people. They were calling to help me. They had always been there, helping. I had never noticed. They were lost in the same maze, but stronger against fear, nervousness, guilt, and loneliness. They seemed to have armor on, wearing it with pride. We became stronger together, but still I felt fear, still I felt nervous, still I felt guilt, still I felt loneliness. Like there was something I was missing. Always remember hearing about him. I said I knew him, the Savior, God. I didn't really know him fully. I didn't know how to feel, or how I would feel, if I trusted, if I stopped trying to fix things myself, if I trusted he would care for me. I wouldn't need to feel fear, feel nervous, feel guilt, feel lonely. I could be free. Even though I'm still in the maze, wandering through, I would never be alone, free to dance, free to celebrate. I have found hope, hope in the Lord. Everyone is stuck in this maze, but everyone can find him. God brings joy in the maze of life.
Wow, thank you very much, Kate. That was wonderful, and that's the first time I've heard that, and probably you too, Chania, but that was super powerful. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that with everyone else that's listening to this podcast right now.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Mrs. Merrily, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I work in the elementary school in Bangkok and in Udon Thani, and I support teachers. And one of my special privileges is to help with the ACSI Creative Writing Festival, and 4th and 5th graders can participate in that.
Wow, did you move here from Udon Thani?
I actually moved to Bangkok from America, and then I taught grade 5 for 3 years in Bangkok, and then I've been working and supporting teachers for 3 years now.
Wow, that's really good. My follow-up question is also for you as well. How does writing help students develop critical thinking and communication skills?
That is a really interesting question because actually the process of writing requires you to do a lot of thinking and organizing your thoughts. So sometimes even before you write, you've already gotten a clearer understanding about what you're thinking on a topic or what you'd like to communicate. And then as far as the critical thinking, when you're writing, you need to consider who your reader is going to be and think about, can you communicate clearly with them and what would matter to them? So it depends, right, if you're trying to persuade them or share information. But that idea of taking somebody else's perspective to see what would be important to them is pretty important when you're solving basically any kind of problem, right, as a critical thinker. And I think being organized and being respectful when you share your perspective is also really helpful in making any change that you would want to affect in the world, make it something that other people could join.
Thank you so much. It's really insightful.
Our next question is for Minhu and Kamwan. Thanks so much for coming on to the show. What grade are you in, and what's your favorite thing about writing?
I'm in 5th grade, and my favorite thing about writing is writing line by line and making it as creative as I can so that the readers can imagine it as a picture and they can understand what I'm trying to say.
I am in grade 5, and I like the feeling after I'm done writing of my accomplished writing piece.
I love that. That's literally the definition of imagery. I love that. And also, for sure, when you are done with your piece and you work really hard on it, that sense of accomplishment is so rewarding. And our next follow-up question for both of you is, what kinds of things do you like to write about?
I like to write about my own life because I can bring back memories.
I like to write about fiction and fantasy because it helps me think about what maybe other people is thinking about.
I love that for both. I mean, who they do say, like, write what you know, like write the experiences that you know, but also Hamwan, like, that's so true. And when you can explore and break down the barriers of the reality that we live in, the fantasy world also so inviting.
Our next question is for Mrs. Merrily. How is writing incorporated into different subjects at the elementary level?
Well, sometimes I think students don't even realize that they're using their writing skills because in all the subject areas, when you want to share your thinking with somebody else and you can't do it immediately, you need to write notes to yourself or you need to write it out, right, to really explain your thinking. So we have a lot of that going on in science and social studies where you're either taking notes about what happened in class or you're looking at a scenario and explaining what you think could happen. Especially in math as well, you would explain. In Bible, we oftentimes have the opportunity to journal, so to reflect on how what we're learning really connects with our lives. And then, of course, elementary is the time when you actually learn to read and write. And so we're using the processes of reading and writing to help each other all of the time because when you learn to write, you have all of the skills that you need also to read well. And then, of course, reading helps you write well. So we're using it all day long, and we're studying good writers as well, even in grammar when we study mentor sentences from read-alouds that we have in the classroom, right? And then we're imitating and copying maybe the type of sentence they used. So writing is actually a big part of the day.
And I think it's also a really good time for self-reflecting in life. And here's another question for Mrs. Merrily. What advice would you give to young writers who are trying to find their voice and style?
Based on my experience, I didn't get to do so much writing, especially creative writing, when I was in school. But as a teacher, I got to join a special writing group at the university where I was living one summer. And it was my first opportunity to have a writing partner. And I would say that if you can find a writing partner, that would be my number one piece of advice. So find somebody who would be interested in reading what you write and talking with you about what you write and helping you make it better. And then just write regularly and take risks. So write in different genres, maybe even write about the same topic in different genres just to try it out, how it could go. And then read really good writing in all different genres because you'll get ideas that you can use in your own writing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Two are better than one, and we can be supportive to each other.
Yeah, I think so too. I think like the biggest writing advice that I hear from like other writers is also just to experiment, and that like your best mentor is reading. Like it actually is, and just like exploring and reading different genres. I'm trying to do that for myself too, and wanting and expand the genres I read a little bit. All right, and now it's your turn, Khamwan and Minhu. Any of you can go first. Here's another question for you. What part of writing do you find the most fun?
Most of the time in writing, I find myself slumped in a chair, and sometimes I get a creative flow in my mind, and I just start writing, and I can't stop writing. I feel like that's really fun because it's a part of me that I don't really see often.
I love that. You know, I think there's like a term for that in the writing community. I think it's called morning pages. Like in the morning, you just come in 10 minutes, you just put on a timer and then just keep writing it. Like, I think there's a word for it, but like you just write everything that you know or everything that comes to mind, just write it all out. And it's like really good. So I love that. You find that fun. All right, what about you, Minhu?
The part that I like a lot about writing is finding the words that fit what I'm writing about, because it might be the hardest part, because finding words can be really hard to describe what you're trying to say, but it's really fun for me to like find words to put in my writing so that it can help the readers imagine what message I'm trying to give them.
I love that. That's a really well thought out answer. Thank you. All right. And here's our last question for the two of you. And it's a fun one. And you'll also have to use your writer's imagination for this one. If your life has been a book so far, what would the book title be?
If my life was a book so far, the title would be Finding Myself, because every day I grow in potential and grow in knowledge, and that helps me become a better person when time passes.
I love that. Finding Myself. Okay. Everyone look out for that in someday in the future. It's gonna be like in bookstores titled what? Finding Myself? All right. What about you, Hawan?
If my life was a book, I'd probably have it called Someone Out There or Somewhere Out There.
I love that. Someone out there, someone out there. Look at that. Great titles.
Thank you, Minhu and Kwamwon. To end this segment, we'd love for you to read the written piece you brought. Minhu can go first and then Kwamwon. To begin, please give us the title and explain briefly what it is about. Then you can read it to us and your audience.
So the title for my poem is A Bit of Hope, and it is about the conflict and violence and all the wars that are going around nowadays in some countries. And I'll read it to you. Only a little bit of hope when I look outside and see, oh, how the prettiest of nature has become a killing spree. How neighbors become enemies over the darkest of nights. When no one sees eye to eye, innocents get involved in plight. All the violence and all the wars have gotten me beyond lowest. Uncountable loss of lives, people are at their darkest. Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, I am on no one's side. Violence is not the answer, and I pray that peace will turn the tide. When tears are gone and all have learned to cope, I kneel down and pray with only a bit of hope.
So good.
My poem's title is Hope Reborn, and it's about a girl who was lost in misery, and she met God and her life turned around and she's happy. Lost in misery, trapped in a cell. In a grim world, a girl did dwell. Beneath the weight of life's cruel distress, she did not find love nonetheless. Through tear-stained nights, she sought comfort. All she needed was love of some sort. Yet in darkness where despair was shown, a new time came, a presence unknown. Divine encounter, moment bizarre. God embraced her like a shining star. Calming words, like healing songs, lifted her spirit, a soothing psalm. In God's embrace, her anguish ceased, a metamorphosis, a soul release. From misery's grip, she found ascent. In the arms of hope, her heart content. With her new strength, she faced the storm, for in meeting God, her hope was reborn. Riding in God's chariot of gold, just as fascinating as told. And now with God for eternity, living in God's realm peacefully.
Thank you so much to both of you. That was absolutely beautiful. I think that poem really just encapsulates a lot of what is going on in our world. And I think sometimes you find it's hard to find the words to express what are the emotions that are coiling inside. And I think that poem does such a great job of doing that. And Hawan, I think that's a really, really beautiful poem as well. And the figurative language or the imagery you use is absolutely out of this world. So good job to the both of you. Thank you so, so much again for coming on our show.
1, 2, 3, 4.
To all our listeners, graduation day is fast approaching, and we couldn't be more excited. Whether you are a senior eagerly counting down the days until your big moment, or a supporter cheering on your loved ones, we want to extend our heartfelt congratulations to all the seniors out there. Your hard work, dedication, and resilience have brought you to this moment, and we can't wait to celebrate your achievements with you. And to everyone else, mark your calendar and join us in celebrating the seniors' graduation on May 25th. It's sure to be a day filled with joy, pride, and unforgettable memories. That ends our PSA for today. Moving on to our story, The Secrets of El Dorado.
We are back for our second segment, and we will continue with part 9 titled Piecing It All Together. But first, here's a quick recap from our last episode.
In the last episode, Lily escapes captivity and the professor nearly was shot. Ava and Sierra discover a trove of evidence and materials that would prove to change the lives of many, many people. Just as they return to safety, or the semblance of safety, Professor Sharpton shows up at Ava's grandma's house. Narrowly escaping danger once again, they return to Ethan's cafe to catch their breaths and solve the mystery.
Thank you, Premi, and without further ado, let's get back into our story where we join Ava, Lily, Sierra, Ethan, and the professor.
Ava has always been a fan of adventure, doesn't mind tension, and even enjoys a healthy amount of danger. However, the last 2 days have proven to be a little bit too much. She finds herself still catching her breath, having just sprinted across her grandma's backyard, through the neighbor's property and onto the back street. After having put some distance between her and Sharpton, who was sitting at her grandma's kitchen's table, she's now bending over it and inhaling sharply and trying to calm down. She pulls up her phone and calls Sierra to warn them. And knowing Hawthorne and the other girls surely can't be that far away yet, since Ava's entire interaction with Professor Sharpton was only about 5 minutes or so. She's also wanting them to come back and pick her up. She notices that her heartbeat is beating twice as fast as it normally does.
Sierra feels her phone buzzing in her side pants pocket, pulls it out and looks at it. She's puzzled when she realizes it's Ava calling her. I mean, she did just drop off a few minutes ago. I wonder what she could want? Sierra thinks to herself. As soon as Sierra hits the green accept button and puts it on speakerphone so Hawthorne and Lily can hear, they all hear Ava's frantic and out-of-breath voice. Ava sounded terrified, her voice dripping with fear.
Ava takes a deep breath the moment Sierra takes the call and says in one long breath, "Sierra, Sharpton's at my house right now. Pick me up, please. Not safe. I'm 1 street over behind my grandma's house on 11th Street, and I'm hiding."
The professor shoots a look over at Sierra, who is now sitting up front in the passenger seat with Lily still in the back seat. His eyes grow wide as he contemplates what to do. "Keep her on the line," he instructs Sierra. "Don't hang up. We're coming right now. We're only a few minutes away." A dozen questions race through the Hawthorne's mind. Sharpton is at Ava's grandmother's house? How did he know she was onto something? What else does he know? Is Sierra's family in danger? Is my wife in danger? What about Ava's grandmother? What did Lily tell Sharpton about us? These were all questions he could not answer. As soon as the road widened a bit, Hawthorne did a quick U-turn. That quick movement to turn the steering wheel reminded him of the large gas in his side. "Ah," he quietly said, as he straightened the Bronco back on the road, headed in the same direction they just came from.
Lily, who was sitting in the back seat, sits there frozen. She had just experienced her own trauma a short time ago and never ever wants to hear Professor Sharpton's name again. She taps her foot anxiously on the backseat floor.
Several minutes later, Hawthorne pulls into Grandma Turner's neighborhood, making sure not to drive down her street. Instead, he drives past it and then makes a turn onto 11th Street. Professor Hawthorne then says out loud, so Ava can hear him on speakerphone, "Ava, we are on 11th Street. Direct me to where you are at."
Ava whispers back in her phone, "I see you guys coming towards me. I'm hiding behind a trash can beside the red house on your left. As soon as you pull up, I'll jump in and then we can go."
Professor Hawthorne pulls up to the place Ava had directed them and looks over at the side of the red house and says, "Here she comes. Lily, open the door for her and move over so she can hop in."
Lily opens the side door and then moves over in the seat to make room for Ava. Lily sees Ava and moving quickly toward them and says, "Get in quick, Ava."
Phew, that was close. Thank you so much, guys. Ava says, having finally caught her breath. Let's get to the cafe. Sierra, Lily, and the professor nod in agreement as Professor Hawthorne drives off again. As the Bronco pulls out of the neighborhood, Ava feels her phone vibrate. She answers it and almost starts crying when she hears her grandma's voice.
Grandma Turner says, "Oh, there you are. Are you okay, Ava? I figured out your coded message and went over to Frank's house when you excused yourself to go to the bathroom. I left that Sharpton guy just sitting at my kitchen table. I don't understand what's going on. And where are you?" Grandma Turner was quite stressed and worried at this point.
Yes, I'm safe and okay. Ava responds and tries to reassure her grandmother that she's safe. I can explain later, but you will just need to trust me right now. Don't go back to your house until I call you back and tell you it's safe. Stay at Frank's for now. I'm heading to the cafe to meet with the others. I'm so sorry I got you caught up in all this, Ava says. Her grandma has to be safe to have been able to have made this phone call, right?
"Oh, honey, don't worry about me. I understood your cues back at the house. I'm safe and sound at Frank's place. Him, his wife, and their 2 big dogs are keeping me company," Grandma Turner says.
Hearing her words in confirmation, Ava signs with relief. Okay, that's good. I'm so sorry for putting you in danger, Gran. Ava feels a growing anger towards Sharpton for having tried to use her grandmother as bait and possibly leverage. Ava doesn't mind putting herself at risk, but when a family member is put to danger, the fear she felt before becomes anger and motivation to move forward and to end the story. Absolutely. And no one gets to make my family feel unsafe.
"I'm really sorry for not having seen through that professor's lies. He seemed like such a nice man, and yet there seems something off about him, and now I know why," Grandma Turner says before voicing out the thoughts she had had since Sharpton had stepped foot into her house, worry spilling over as she continues to ask more questions of Ava. "How do you know that man? How does he know where I live? Are you in danger, Ava? Are you in danger?"
I don't know, Ava thinks to herself. I don't know. Not wanting to further risk her grandma or make her more worried, Ava responds and says, Gran, I'll be okay. And once we get to the bottom of this, I can come tell you the whole story, okay? She breathes again, reassuring her grandmother that everything is going to be okay.
Grandma Turner feels a little more relaxed now, thinking that Ava will be safe. Just before hanging up, Grandma Turner tells Ava, "Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I told Frank to watch out the front window, and he said he saw that man walking away from my house, go across the street, get in a parked car, and then drive off."
Ava's eyes widen before telling her grandma to stay put in Frank's house, telling her to be safe and to take care of herself. Ava hangs up the call and immediately informs Professor Hawthorne, Sierra, and Lily that her grandma is safe at her neighbor's house and that Sharpton has left. Ava then says out loud, I wonder where Sharpton's going now.
Meanwhile, back at the cafe, Ethan sees off another large group of customers who stayed for a late lunch. He walks with them to the front door, thanks them, and then tells them that they are always welcome back when they are in town. It was almost 2:30 in the afternoon already, far later than the time the last group of customers from the day before had left. At least that's what his staff had reported to him. Lunch was especially busy today, with all the people in town for the Gold Red Festival, and with the weekend right around the corner. Ethan's happy about the sales in the cafe and hopes this summer is even bigger than last summer. He strolls back to the kitchen, almost forgetting the other saga that's happening with his friends. Just then, he hears a knock on the back cafe door. It was a secret knock Ava, Sierra, and Professor Hawthorne had used earlier that morning. Ethan thinks to himself, it must be them again. He hurries to the back door before any other staff could get there, unlocks it, and then opens it. Come in, quickly, he says. Ethan watches as Sierra, Lily, Ava, and then Professor Hawthorne all enter the back of the cafe and retreat to Ethan's office again. After closing and locking the back door, Ethan meets them in the office and asks, I bet you guys are starving, especially you, Lily. I can have my staff make you all something, just let me know.
Hey Ethan, thanks for the welcome back, Lily smiles, suddenly feeling like she was finally safe. I'll definitely take your famous sandwich with a mund of fries and something to drink. I haven't eaten in... Lily hesitates, trying to remember back, before realizing, I don't even know the last time I ate. Maybe yesterday morning?
Ethan, can I get something too? We haven't had lunch, Ava says, before looking around to find Sierra and the professor nodding, then adding, and something for Sierra and the professor too. Whatever you're making, Lily, if you can make 4 of them.
Sure, no problem, Ethan said. Give me a second to get these orders to my kitchen staff, then, when they're ready, I'll have them delivered to you in here so you can eat and talk. In the meantime, you should get Lily caught up on what happened yesterday after she was taken.
Thank you so much, Ethan, Lily says as she pulls out one of the chairs, takes a deep breath, and then sits down. Wow, the past 2 days have been crazy. As Lily says this, she points to the gold bar now sitting on Ethan's desk, and then points to her backpack, which is resting on the floor next to Sierra. And where did you find my backpack? And what's inside of it?
Professor Hawthorne smiles and then takes a seat across from Lily and gives her a brief recap of what he and Ethan's field trip to Rob's Peak, the characters they discovered in the mines, and the substance they had found in the mine number 3. After finishing the story about Rob's Peak, he then scratches his head and says out loud, what else happened yesterday? I mean, it feels like forever ago.
A lot, Ava responds. Sierra and I had our own little adventure at the reservoir after Sierra got off work and late into the night. Hold on, I'll write all this down since it's fresh in our minds. We'll need to record the sequence of events with as much detail as possible. It'll be helpful for when the FBI gets here. Ava says all of this while thinking in the back of her mind that the document she creates will also help her write her series of articles for the Bee when it's time. However, she doesn't say this part aloud as she does not want to come across as self-serving. Ava looks over at Sierra, who was sitting next to Lily. Hey Sierra, why don't you catch Lily up about what happened at the reservoir and how we found her backpack? And maybe even the scary ledge part. This way, I'll type while you talk.
Of course, Sierra responds before telling Lily about being suspicious of Professor Hawthorne, which became the reason the two girls went without telling him or Ethan, and how Ethan's tracker, which she put in Lily's backpack for a test, was what allowed the professor and Ethan to stop at the reservoir on their way back from Rob's Peak because they thought Lily was there, but instead finding Sierra and Ava trapped on the spillway ledge and holding on for their dear lives. She then tells Lily about the meeting her and Ava overheard the bad guys having, taking blurry photos, having an audio recording, and then discovering that one of the bad guys was Professor Sharpton. Sierra then tells Lily that they found her backpack in the room the bad guys were having their meeting, and that she thinks they forgot to take it with them because they left in a hurry after hearing the breaking picnic table.
Yup, Ava interjects. Lily, we were still worried when we found out you were gone. We were all over the place trying to find where you were. Sierra was especially worried. She's the sweetest.
Aw, Lily says, she is the sweetest. Thank you all for worrying about me and then finding me in the woods and then driving me back. What happened after the reservoir then?
We were really overwhelmed by all the facts and new knowledge that presented itself that night. The most pressing and heaviest part was that we realized, whatever this is, it was a lot bigger than any of us. It's not just about a kidnapping or two or a simple misunderstanding. There are some important people, public figures, and prominent community members involved. And I think this has been going on for a long time. And they've used the tunnels on Old Man Sutter's property to keep all their secrets from the public. I mean, if the Secrets of El Dorado County came out, as I think they will now, this county, the state, and potentially in the entire country will not be the same again. U.S. history books may have to be rewritten. We have in our possession, in this office in fact, what appears to be a trove of damning evidence that dates back to the mid-1800s.
Just then, Ethan returned with trays full of sandwiches, fries, and drinks. Alright, I hope I didn't miss too much. What went down today?
Wow, these look great. Thanks so much, Ethan, the professor says as he grabs a sandwich and a soda from the tray. You're just in time, too. Lily knows about Rob's Peak and the reservoir. The professor continues as the others are getting their food and getting situated in the office. Also, really early in the morning, Ava came through with her contact at the Bee who had connections with the FBI. We now know the identities of 2 of the other people in the meeting at the reservoir, besides Professor Sharpton. Let's see, Mayor Ruiz and California State Rep Brown. We are unsure about the other 2 identities, but my guess is that they are quite prominent in our community or state.
Lily's eyes widen as she says, "Wow, that's crazy." And then she asks, "So how did you end up at the same place I was being held? The tunnels?"
It's actually pretty simple. We went on a hunch and followed some more clues from the manuscript, the professor answered. However, we had no idea what we were getting into, to say the least. I mean, look at me. My clothes are still wet and I still need to go see the doctor about this cut. And I've never been shot at before. The professor pauses, sits back in his chair.
Ethan then interjects. The professor's right. Lily, we met here this morning and talked about the plan for today. I couldn't go since I was caught up with the cafe because one of the morning staff members didn't show up. Ethan goes on and asks, Lily, how did you escape?
Ava stops taking notes for a minute and looks up to repeat the question. Yeah, Lily, how did you escape? We haven't heard that part yet.
Having just taken another bite of food, Lily waits a moment and then gives them all a play-by-play account of what happened in the tunnel and how she was able to push the gate open, find her way through the dark maze, and then out to freedom. She explains to them about the guard being distracted by what may have been the noise of the other three entering the tunnel, about her being scared but brave, her thought process discovering Chen's sweatshirt, and then wondering what they have done with him.
You're so right, Lily, Ava interrupts. There's still a missing person out here. She continues, I mean, I assume Chen was held in that very room you were, but before they brought you there. So where did they move him to?
Lily points to the dirty sweatshirt hanging over the back of one of the chairs and says, his name is written on the inside tag. Lily continues talking. I really need his help with the formula that he wrote. I think that is why they took him. I think that formula is the key to why we're all in this situation. She goes on. I mean, I don't remember much about being taken yesterday morning, but I do remember that I was in the science lab at the college and the formula called for a substance that the lab did not have. So I asked Professor Sharpton, who was there monitoring the lab, if he could help me. As soon as he saw what I was working on, all these bad things just started happening to all of us.
Sierra lets out a sigh and adds, I don't know Chen very well. I know him just as a customer here at the cafe. But I do hope he can be found. I hope he is safe and hasn't been harmed yet.
Hawthorne interrupts, I hear you, Sierra. He was one of my best students and a great TA. I think he stumbled upon something he was not supposed to, tried it, discovered it, worked, and then that's what triggered all these things. The professor continues, So Lily, you mentioned a mystery element the science lab at the college did not have, an element the formula calls for?
Yes, Lily answers. Lily proceeds to grab a piece of paper from Ethan's desk and starts scribbling down a formula and then says, See this symbol right here. This is the element I need in order for this formula to work. I also memorized the formula yesterday morning as I was tired of having to go back and forth between my phone and the lab tools.
The professor jumps in just as Lily is done speaking and says, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think Ethan and I found the missing element you need for the formula. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but the substance we found in mine number 3 on Rob's Peak, which was labeled positive by the miners, contains some sort of element in the walls of one of the shafts. I scraped off some samples, which I left here in the office this morning. Oh, there's the sample, over there, that's on the shelf by the door. The professor gets up and grabs the baggie off the shelf, looks down at it, and continues. I've been around a lot of different rocks and dirt in my lifetime, and this sample here, well, it's unique and rare.
Wow, Lily responds. The 2 things I was missing in the lab yesterday to make this formula work was, number 1, extreme heat. More heat than the small Bunsen burner the lab has on hand. And that substance you are now holding, Professor. We need to find a way to test this. That's the only way we will be able to know why these people want to keep it a secret.
Sierra, half listening as she finishes her salty fries, says, Lily, did I just hear you say you need extreme heat? One of my artisan friends has a kiln at her house, and according to her, she has to fire her porcelain pieces at a much higher temperature than her clay pieces. Maybe her kiln would work. If so, then don't we have what we need?
Lily answers, Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay, guys, let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. Now that we have our sequence of events all figured out, let's lay out all the evidence Ava and Sierra pulled from the rooms in the tunnels and see if we can put more of the pieces together. He continues, We haven't received a call back from Agent Carson yet, so we're not sure when he's going to show up, and I don't think it's safe yet for us to be out and about, especially while it's still light out. Also, Lily, there's probably a few other items you would need to get from the science lab that the formula calls for, that you don't really have on you right now.
Ethan jumps in and says, I'll bring up the big elephant in the room. I mean, there's a U.S. Treasury gold bar sitting on my desk, and with the look of it, it's probably over 25 pounds. And also, what's with all the old dusty stuff in Lily's backpack?
Actually, Ethan, if that gold bar is what I think it is, then it's 27.4 pounds or 12.4 kilos. That's the international standard for traded gold bullion between central banks. I wrote about it in one of my books. It's also got the U.S. Treasury Department stamped on it, which means it either was minted by the Treasury Department or was minted and is heading to the Treasury Department. Either way, the thing sitting on your desk is worth about $750,000 US.
Everyone in Ethan's small office immediately stopped eating, looked up at the professor, and then around the room with faces that said, "You've got to be kidding me." Ava breaks the silence with a question to Sierra and says, "Sierra, do you remember that large pallet that was covered with the tarp in the tunnel room?"
Yeah? Sierra answers, knowing where Ava is going with this question.
Well, there's probably hundreds more. Maybe upwards of 1,000 of those gold bars down in one of the tunnel rooms Sierra and I were in. They were covered with an old cloth tarp. We didn't get to look, but the shape and the size of the objects under the tarp matched description of being a lot of those gold bars all stacked on top of each other. Ava is smiling as she's saying this.
Okay, but let's get back to the backpack. I'm not going back down in those tunnels again right now, Sierra says.
Yeah, I would not go down those tunnels either. But back to the backpack. Come on, guys. There could be close to $750 million in gold sitting down that tunnel. Ava pauses for a moment, thinking about it, and then continues. Sierra and I found a lot of other odds and ends in one of the other rooms. We filled Lily's backpack with what we could carry, but there's a lot more of this stuff down there than what we could carry out. My hope is that we can study this together and it'll help us piece the other parts of this puzzle together. We'll need to be efficient about looking at all this stuff in the backpack and making note of each item though. Once we hand it over to the FBI, we probably won't ever see it again, and it's our only leverage we have at this point.
Sierra and Lily open the backpack and start laying out all the items from the backpack onto the small table sitting against the wall in Ethan's already small office. Sierra then says, "I'll just pick up an item, pass it around, and see if we notice anything about it."
Ava then instructs, "Once you're done looking at it, place it over by the door, on the floor. I'll take a photo of it, and then I can make a note of it."
This is exciting. I'm actually doing things we learned about in forensics classes this past year. I can't believe it. This is so surreal.
The professor and Ethan watch as the girls lay out and organize the items that were jammed into the backpack. Professor Hawthorne, noticing the pain more now from his cut on his side, then says, "I'm going to need to sneak over to Doc Rivers' office across the street as soon as he closes. He's going to need to clean and stitch this cut. Let's get started and see how far I get."
Sierra passes around old newspaper clippings, mostly intact from old and local small newspapers from the early and late 1930s. Some were quite hard to read and were too torn or faded. However, the group found several references in the clippings about several families in the local family that were relatives of the family who had traveled from Virginia in search for gold. One of the interviews that the paper had conducted was with a very old man who told some outlandish stories about what his relatives had done.
Ava then says, "Yeah, let me see that." She reads a few of the clippings and then says, "The man being interviewed alleges that the two Chinese brothers who owned the cabin up on Rob's Peak were robbed and murdered because of something they had discovered in one of the mines. Oh, it also says that the two brothers made gold. Weird." The article then talks about large amounts of cargo being wagon trained across the U.S. back to Virginia, especially between 1851 to 1861. Then it continued after the Civil War by railroad train to Virginia and Washington, D.C.
The professor then adds, "This old map here confirms the location of some of the cabins on Rob's Peak, along with the worker camps that used to be in the valley of what we now know as the reservoir. You see, there used to be a dozen or more worker camps along the reservoir valley."
Ethan then interrupts everyone and says, "Well, this seems like a classic cover-up of some sorts. Steal from the little guys. Destroy the evidence and get rid of all the witnesses, and then cover up what you did."
The room went silent for a moment, and then the professor followed that up with, "Okay, let's go with this theory and assume that's what the evidence is showing us." He continues, Bear with me as I play out this theory. Okay, the two brothers from China come to the new America looking for work and a better life. They bring over some ancient alchemist formula, discover that it works after they find the one element they're missing in mine site number 3. This mine site also included an inscription of the Chinese character that translates as positive, as Ethan and I discovered. The two families from Virginia, who were part of the ruling and political class back east at that time, sent several family members here at the beginning of the gold rush in 1849. I'm assuming they were either wanting to get rich themselves or were needing the gold they were going to find for something else. I mean, why would they come all this way? They were already wealthy and well-to-do back in Virginia, unless, the professor stopped for a moment.
They needed the gold for the South because at the time the southern states were wanting to secede from the Union, the northern states. They wanted to find gold and send it back to Richmond, Virginia, which was the capital of the South. Eva says all of this as she slowly gets up out of her chair and takes a couple of steps over to the table that's holding all the stuff in the backpack. She then picks up one of the dirty, old sealed glass jars, tries to pry the lid off, no luck. So then she drops it onto the floor. Glass breaks and shatters, revealing all the contents inside.
Yup, Ethan says. I think my theory is going to be proved correct. If I'm not mistaken, these look like real gold nuggets.
The room is silent for a moment as all of them look down at the numerous gold nuggets laying around the broken glass pieces. The professor then says, if this is true, if that formula has the capacity to make gold, then that's a pretty big secret that needs to be kept quiet. I'll bet that some of that gold made here back in those days was used to help fund the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Those two families from Virginia not only had ties to the political class in Virginia, but also had ties to the military.
Sierra then asked another question to the group. When Ava and I were down in the tunnel room, we found really old, mining tools that had Chinese characters etched into some of the wooden handles and on some of the metal parts. What could that mean? Ava took photos of some of them.
Lily then asks, Ava, let me see those pictures. I may be able to tell what the characters represent. Lily looks at several of the images and then blurts out, those characters are family names. Those tools have the names of families on them. My guess is that those tools belong to certain worker families.
Ava then says, here's another article from, I guess, the same time period as the other ones we read. And it talks about the gold rush days as well. And then it talks about the several large fires that ripped through all the worker camps, killing many of them. And then some of the workers and their family members just disappearing, never to be seen again.
I told you, Ethan replies. A classic cover-up.
Wow, it sure looks that way. This is huge. Wait, okay, so the two families and their paid cronies just basically wiped out over a dozen worker camps and murdered countless prospectors and their family members? And they took that formula and made gold and then sent it back to the East to fund the Confederate war effort against the Union? Eva's creative mind is spinning all over the place as she continues to type out all the details the group is talking about.
As they are picking up the glass and looking at the small gold nuggets they had been on the floor, Sierra sees the ledge book sitting on the table under a few other newspaper clippings and old letters. She grabs it and then opens it and says, I forgot I grabbed this, but this ledger booklet may also be important. It contains dates, names, weights, and money amounts. This ledger has names and dates that range from the 1850s through the early 1900s. There are two names that show up a lot here, Stewart and Johnson. Professor, do either of those names ring a bell?
Professor Hawthorne thinks for a moment and then says, California State Rep Deborah Stewart Brown. He pauses for a moment and continues, she kept her maiden name Stewart. When she was campaigning many years ago, I remember her making a big deal about why she kept her maiden name when she got married. She said something about how her family helped build the state of California and how she always wanted voters to remember that when they heard her name. The professor stops for a moment, cracks a half smile, and then says, the irony here. This ledger book records hundreds of payout amounts to the Stewart family over 50 plus years. And I'm guessing these are all bribes. Wow, this is huge, especially if this is still happening today. I mean, think about it. State Rep Stewart Brown helped pass legislation years ago to create the dam and the reservoir. Here's an article from that pile about how her bill passed and then became law. The article praises her as being a conservationist, along with her efforts to protect and preserve the natural beauty and water resources of this area. She also controls the budgets of certain parks and rec areas in El Dorado County. The ledger that you found in the tunnel incriminates just about every one of her ancestors. Fast forward to today, my guess is that this secret group is still using their power and wealth to bribe corrupt politicians and prominent city and county officials like the mayor, Professor Sharpton, maybe even the sheriff's office. I mean, the man who shot at me in the tunnel still had his deputy's uniform on.
Ava knows they've hit the jackpot and can't wait to get started structuring her series of articles. Ava picks up her phone and calls her editor at the Bee and asks for more resources. She informs the editor that she's working on a series of articles that will hit the national news. Probably the international news circuits too. She requests the help of Ted along with a larger budget so she can set up a working office in Coloma for the next few months. The investigation and coming warrants and arrests will take months to follow and report on, and she wants to be on the front lines. She doesn't want the story to fall into the hands of any other reporter, especially since she and her friends have risked so much to get the information they're now looking at.
As all of this has been happening, Lydia has been going over the formula and this new element in her head. She's also been looking at some of the other old papers found, which include chemical symbols, numbers, and temperatures. She's pretty sure the formula Chen had will work with the right heat, and this new element the professor had a sample of. She picks up another sealed jar that is sitting on the table and then notices that the contents look similar to the element the professor found in mine site number 3. She then says, "I've got enough information and substances here to recreate the experiment. It looks like this other jar contains the same substance the professor and Ethan found in the mine site." She continues and says out loud, "I think this formula, if mixed properly, can convert a base metal into like lead, zinc, or tin into gold. And depending on what base metal is used, the gold produced could be graded between 18 to 24 karat gold, the latter being 99.9% pure gold. If I had to guess, that gold bar there looks to be close to 24 karat gold."
Professor Hawthorne then says, "The FBI will need to investigate the connection between all of this and the U.S. Treasury Department. I hope the corruption does not go up that far in our federal government."
Ava chimes in, "You never know, Professor. Money makes people do weird and unforeseen things," she continues. "A little secret bad guy group is being paid, and it's paying other people to keep their little secret. So now that we know how all the history stuff is connected, we still need to find out how Chen came about getting this formula and where he's been taken." The conversation among the group is like popcorn. The evidence and details help them connect just about all the dots.
Ethan then says, "I looked up the name Johnston online around that time period in history, specifically during the 1850s and 1860s, and, well, according to what I found, there was a family with the same name that played an important part in the political structure of the South at that time. If I had to bet, these people are probably related."
Ava then interjects, "I think I found an identity of one of the other persons in that secret meeting at the reservoir. I'm not 100% sure, but there's been a recently published magazine that includes a long and flowery article on the newly elected Coloma City Council member, Margaret Deason."
Sierra then responds, "If she's potentially the 4th person in that room, then who was the 5th? We know it was a man."
"Was this man large?" the professor asked, with the hopes it was the guard he encountered in the tunnel.
"No, he wasn't very large. I would say he was average build," Sierra answers.
The professor looks down at his watch, feeling quite tired and achy, and says, "I need to head over to Doc Rivers' clinic across the street. The clinic just closed and I need to catch the doc before he leaves for the evening. I also need to check in with my wife and let her know what's going on. There's no hiding these scratches on my face or my ripped and dirty shirt." By this time, the group had looked at and documented all the things Ava and Sierra had taken from the tunnels. The professor stood up and looked around at all the others. Ava was still typing some of her own thoughts and ideas out. Sierra was still snapping photos of some of the last bits of items from the backpack. Ethan was studying some of the letters that were recovered, and Lily was inspecting the gold nuggets she had picked up off the floor. Before the professor could walk out of the office, Ava's phone rings and startles them. Almost at the same time, the professor's phone rings. The professor answers and then says to the group, "It's the FBI, it's Agent Carson." The professor stands there nodding his head and then replies, "No, we're all together." "It wasn't safe for us to go back to our own houses," he continues. "Okay, yes, we're currently in town and hiding out in the back of Ethan's cafe." "Yes, we have the things we took from the tunnel." "No, we haven't interacted with anyone or shown anyone those things." The professor listens a bit longer and then hangs up the phone and says to the others, who are looking back and forth at Ava and the professor, who are both on calls at the same time, "Agent Carson is on his way here as we speak, and he's being accompanied by the special agent in charge of the San Francisco FBI field office and by a forensic officer. I think he said his name was Williamson or something. This is a pretty big deal if the lead field office agent and the forensic officer will be here within the hour."
Ava then jumps into the conversation. "I just got off the phone with Ted, and he and the editor will be here tomorrow mid-morning. This is a big deal if the Bee's editor is coming here personally." She says this as she's trying to hold back her excitement at what will probably be a career-changing event for her, and in a good way.
The professor then says that he's standing in the doorway getting ready to leave for the clinic. Okay. We know this is a big deal, so let's not slip up right now. Let's keep all this evidence here in this room. The FBI is going to want all this stuff intact when they arrive, and I'm assuming they'll tag it, bag it, and take it with them." The professor turns around and then adds as he exits the office, "I'll be back shortly, so stay put." He exits the cafe and into the alley, closing the back cafe door behind him. He takes a few steps and then his phone rings again. He answers, "Hey honey, I was just going to call you and ask if you could come meet me at Doc Rivers' clinic on Main Street. I had a small mishap today. No, I'm okay, nothing serious. I'll tell you when I see you. It's a long story. Yeah, sorry, I must have been in a place with no cell phone service. No, I didn't get your text message either." As Hawthorne talks with his wife, he observes many of the downtown shops starting to close early because of the annual Gold Rush Festival parade, which will be happening that evening. The parade starts several blocks down and several streets over and comes directly down Main Street in front of Ethan's Cafe and all the other shops located there. The parade attracts a mixture of local town residents and tourists as they all cram into the downtown area to enjoy a family fun summertime event. The parade often includes festive and decorated floats that are usually pulled by pickup trucks and tractors, 2 or 3 county high school marching bands, local clubs, and the ever so popular El Dorado College's award-winning drumline members. The parade is a colorful and fun event that brings so many people together from all over the place. The evening then concludes with a controlled fireworks display which the county parks office approved since there was plenty of rain and snow melt during the spring season. No worries of forest fires this year. Professor Hawthorne's phone is about to die because of the water damage it sustained during his swim across the river earlier that day. So he says to his wife quickly, "My phone is acting weird and it may cut off, so really quick. Can you bring me a fresh shirt as well?" "Yes, I'm walking over to the clinic right now. I will see you in a few minutes." "No, okay, really quick." The professor stops walking and just stands there on the sidewalk now, next to Ethan's Cafe and directly across the street from the clinic. Professor Hawthorne then says abruptly, "Wait, what? Bill Sharpton called you today? Really?" No, you didn't do anything wrong. Okay, just get here as soon as you can. I'll be at the clinic, so just knock on the front glass window and someone will come out and let you in." Hawthorne then walks across Main Street toward the clinic. One other person emerges from the alley but stays close to the building's side wall. This person had been hiding near the fire escape staircase on another business's back door. The stranger peers across the street and watches as the professor greeted by the doctor at the front door of the clinic and then is let inside. And that ends part 9. Thank you for listening. Tune in next episode as we conclude our story, The Secrets of El Dorado, with our season finale, part 10, titled The Showdown and Reveal. As we end this episode, we'd like to again thank Mr. Ben and Miss Marilee and our student writers for joining us and for sharing not only insight into the importance of writing, but also sharing their writing pieces with us. So thank you. Again, make sure you don't miss our next and final episode of Season 2, which we will bring you the conclusion to our epic adventure of the Secrets of El Dorado. And as always, this podcast would not be possible without the hard work and support of our international student production team.
All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com, a vibrant community of creatives sharing copyright-free images, videos, and music.
And we are signing off until next time. We are Students Incorporated, because your voice matters.